0 hours contracts. Would you be surprised to learn that the majority of people on 0 hours contracts like being on 0 hours contracts?
I probably would, yes.
Yeah, okay, so that's what we'll leave it there. So we'll leave it with the majority of people, if they want to be on 0 hours contracts, why would I stop the majority getting what they want?
Well, Mr. Ashley, you're not then going to ensure or enforce a position where people who don't want to be on 0 hour contracts in House of Fraser, currently not on them, are forced to move over. I'm just asking a simple question.
And I'm giving you a very simple answer. Yeah? I am telling you, if the majority of people want to be on 0 hours contracts, then that's what we will have. The majority will rule. If the majority don't want 0 hours contracts, we won't have 0 hours contracts. I can't always fix it for every last person. It's not possible. I can do things.
How will you decide if the majority want 0 hour contracts?
Because we've had surveys at Sports Direct and they came out with the vast majority wanted them, same as McDonald's. And you know what? People in retail tend to be the same. They tend not to be very different from one thing to another.
So
and by the way,
how are you going to judge the mood at House of Fraser employees?
How am I going to what?
Judge whether House of Fraser employees all want to transfer to 0 hour contracts. How are you going to do that?
Well, I'm very happy to have surveys. I have no problem with surveys. I have no problem with surveying Sports Direct people again. And if the vast majority no longer want 0 hours contracts, then let's get rid of them. No problem for me. It doesn't make that much difference to me whether or not they're on 0 hour or they're not on 0 hour. You seem to think there's some huge advantage of 0 hour. It's the flexibility that it brings. 0 hours are very simple. Students love them because they can come and do when their term time is finished, they can then just come and say, right, I want to work, I don't want to commit, but if you need me, I can come in. Students love 0 hours contracts. A lot of mums love 0 hours contracts because they want the flexibility not to have to come in on school holidays. I don't think you actually understand that the popularity of 0 hours contracts.
Well, I think I understand the popularity of people having some sort of guaranteed income, but that's another. Well, I think when you came to a previous select committee meeting with the base select committee, you actually committed to ending 0 hour contracts at Sports Direct. You haven't kept that promise, have you?
Yes, I've absolutely kept that promise because we went out, we surveyed the workforce, we said, what would you like? Would you like contracts? Do you have a guaranteed 5 hours or a guaranteed 15 hours or a guaranteed 25 hours? Whatever it is, go down, tick the appropriate boxes. And the vast majority, and I'm going to get this figure wrong now, I'm going to say 80%, but that'll be the wrong figure. So let's go safe. 70% of people said, no, we like the complete flexibility. You're wrong. Simple as that, you're wrong.
Those that didn't want the flexibility couldn't have the guaranteed income.
Are we going to go round and round on the same thing? I can only do it for the vast majority. I can't get every single little thing right. It's not possible. I had to say to the committee last time, I know I'm ultimately responsible for every action of every person in the SDI group, but in reality it's impossible. It would be like in asking the policeman for every burglar he personally was responsible. It's not possible. We can only do things on the vast majority. If the vast majority want something, that's what we give them. It's as simple as that.
Well, I think some employers manage to have different contracts for different employees.
But
Liz, over to you now.
Yes, Mr. Ashley. I'd just like to ask a simple question. For the staff that you've taken on from House of Fraser, will you be maintaining their current contracts of employment and the conditions? And will you be recognising the trade unions that they were in?
So, first of all, you've got to understand that House of Fraser, do you agree it's got to be a totally different business to what it was? Do you agree? It's got to change. That's where it went bust. It went bust because it wasn't right what was being offered.
Yeah.
So therefore you have to say we have to change things. We have to change things. And guess what? That may be we don't have as many people. Because everybody knows you went in a House of Fraser and it was like nobody was in there. Yeah, the only people were in there was sometimes appeared to be the staff. Yeah, so you've got to say, OK, maybe they got their staff ratios completely wrong to the modern day demand on high streets. So you say, well, are you going to guarantee every single person? I will tell you now, you can ask me the question as many ways as you like. No, because I can't. It's impossible what you're asking me to do. It doesn't make sense. So I understand, in principle, yes. But you want to say every last person, every this. It's impossible for anybody. And if they sit here, anybody, and says they can, I don't believe them. I literally don't believe them. Otherwise, they won't be sat here in 2030 for sure. They won't be sat here in 2020. The high street has to change what it offers the consumers. Therefore, what people were doing before will not be right now, and I can absolutely guarantee you will not be right in the future. I can guarantee it.
So we understand, and we'll hear more about what your views are on the future of the High Street. But what I'm specifically asking about is those staff that you've taken on, and whether you will retain their contracts as they are, or whether there will be negotiation with the recognised trade union about any changes you may wish to bring in.
Okay, so I'm going to answer this again, that the world is going to change very much, and therefore we have to look at House of Fraser and any other business that we buy, including SDI itself, and it has to change. It's constantly changing. Yeah? So that is my answer. I do not want to be putting concrete boots by, for example, and I don't know if they are, prehistoric practices that are not relevant for today's retail consumers. Say a store's used to open at 9 o'clock. There's no customers on the high street at 9 o'clock anymore. Say stores need to open at 12 o'clock now. That person's contract would have to move. Maybe shoppers want to come in and pick up their internet parcels after work. So whereas a store used to shut at 6 o'clock or 5:30, maybe it needs to stay open later. Just think about it. Yeah? Stop trying to showboat and pin me down here because that's what you're here to do. I thought we were here to talk about saving the high street, but clearly not. That answers your question as fairly as I can.
Well, I'm not entirely sure that it does answer my question, but I've heard the response. The
Thanks.
one thing I haven't heard is any reference to the trade unions.
Okay, okay. Give me 1 second, let me get my glasses on. Right, trade union. Now, we all know I was here before, and we all know that I was very unhappy with Ian Wright, with his links with Unite. I don't think it's right that he had received money from Unite. I think that makes him conflicted. I think that puts Unite in a very difficult position. And by the way, I'm not against unions. That's the funny thing. Yeah, the odd thing is you keep arguing against the person. It's actually for the people. But anyway, let me just read you this. Steve Turner, obviously of Unite. This is when he came to Sharbrook and he went round with 3 people, 4 people. It was the agencies we were after. We had to get you in order to get the agencies. He repeated, our problem is not with you, it's with the agencies. We can't get to them, so we had to come after you. That makes negotiations with the union very difficult. I understand what the union's problem is. They need to fix the deal over here. And you know what? If I'm the perfect pantomime villain, poster boy to pick on, it's part of the process. Okay? But when you then say to me, work with the union, I've got to make sure that they don't want to make me the pantomime villain again. They're poster boy for everything that's bad. Because I'm not. And I don't know of any other retailer that paid out voluntary all the way through the group, every single full-time person shared 250 million in super bonuses, not normal bonuses, super bonuses. Think about that.
Okay, let's Let's move on then. Have you got a supplementary matter, or do you think?
No, it's okay.
Okay. Tan, can we move on to your area?
Thank you very much, Mr. Ashley. In terms of what you just said, let's just dwell a bit more about 0 hours contracts. I know that what you've intimated is that the majority of the workforce, whether that's at Sports Direct, and I know that you'll no doubt be doing surveys for House of Fraser as well, that the majority of them want to remain on 0 hours contracts, but the evidence that the likes of us have got in terms of interactions with unions or staff is that they are extremely anxious about 0 hours contracts and the race to the bottom. Now, given that scenario, in terms of the stores that you will have on the high street or elsewhere, would you reconsider in terms of employing those people not on 0 hours contracts but with proper contracts with that security of work?
We do. Do you know how many people we take from 0 hours contracts and they work their way right through the company, all the way to the top? It's not a thing. If you're on a 0 hours contract, you then don't. You would be the first in line to be offered a full-time contract. Think about it, because we already know you. We've already worked with you. You already stand how our processes work. It's a fantastic stepping stone on the way up. It's a total positive. And I'm going to say it again, but all I get the sense is that people want to pick on things because that's a political hot potato. 0 hours contracts, they're so terrible, they're draconian, they're this, they're that. They're not perfect. I never said they were perfect. I said in lots of circumstances they are absolutely fit for purpose. And what's more, think how many people have come through. I should probably do a survey at Sports Direct to find out how many full-time employees have come through 0 contracts. The truth is I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I just know that I meet people, and when this a sort of debate comes around, they say, do you know I started on 0 contracts, Mike? Do you know I started on 0 contracts, Mike? Look who I am. I'm running head of transport. I'm this, I'm that. I'm manager XYZ. Our most successful manager, as I understand it, in the stores, started on 0 contracts. It's been in the public. It's been in the press. It's not a secret. Why do you can't make it such a negative thing?
Okay, well,
literally, I will commit to if the majority of people don't want 0 hours contracts, then we should do away with
Let's
them.
move on
Simple as that.
in terms of House of Fraser. When you took charge of that, you've said that you're going to turn it, and I quote, into the Harrods of the High Street, and you're hoping to keep about 59 stores open. Now, there are many around the country that are anxious in terms of store closures. What factors would you take into consideration, or will you take into consideration when deciding on whether to close a store?
Please, it is not possible you call me here today and quote that I said I'd try and keep 59 stores open. I never said that, and you know it. This group here doesn't know I never said I would keep 59 stores open. Never.
Well, I've got a direct quote from yourself. You wanted to turn Harrods into the House of Fraser into the Harrods of the High Street and hope to keep 59 stores open. So
as many as the 59, and everybody knows I set a target of 80%. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows I set a target of 80%. Okay. What person could keep 59 stores open besides God? It's impossible. It can't be done. Okay, why do you want to drag me to these committees and try and get me to commit to things that can't be done? There's no point. Let's be realistic. If I manage to save 80% of them, by the way, that might be a godlike performance. And before anybody says it, I'm not comparing myself to God.
Okay, brilliant. I don't think anybody else on the committee is either. So just to answer the question, what factors would you take into consideration when deciding whether to close a store?
So first of all, it's lots. So let's talk about a store. What time frame are you going to give me for keeping a store? 3 months, 6 months, a year, a 10-year lease, a 15-year lease? What time frame? Just give me an idea of the time frame.
Look, I'm not here to answer
I understand. So now you understand the complexity of the answer. Because if I give an answer like that, everybody will say, you said that. I go, well, that's not, of course I didn't mean that. Be realistic. So you say, okay, so Glasgow, Well, have you committed to keep the number one store open, Fraser's in Glasgow? Yes. How did you manage to do that? We bought it. So by definition, we committed £100 into Fraser's of Glasgow, so you can then invest in the store. What happens in stores that you therefore can't buy for whatever reason? That makes them very difficult to invest in. What happens if you have a landlord that wants it for development for something else? Because they're going to make a fortune if it turns into flats, service business offices, everything else. A lot of the property has got a lot of value for other uses, and it's not easy to keep it as retail. And everybody wants to say greedy landlords. I accept some landlords are being greedy, but the vast majority of landlords want to sit down and work something out. They do. But then we get into time frames, investments, how we're going to do it. What happens if you have a store that actually, in fact, the whole high street dies around it? What are you going to do with the store then? Because I said, OK, I'll sign a 10-year lease. It's not going to help. In the end, that might bring the whole business down. I said before to the previous committee, I'm not Father Christmas. I'm actually a very, I believe, fair guy. I try and be fair, I try and be balanced. But you can't get me to predict a number with all the different variables going in, other than why wouldn't I want to save them?
Okay, well,
what advantage have I got of closing
them? Let's go
them?
into empty stores. We had Bill Grimsey, who presented evidence to the committee earlier this year in terms of how empty stores are a massive scar on our high street, and in terms of the huge void that they leave behind. So do you worry late at night about the impact of closing a store on the health of the high street in which that store is situated?
But why do you ask me late at night? Why don't you say on a Monday morning or during the normal working day, when I'm supposed to be considering these things? That's when I think about them.
Whatever time of day, whether it's
and in the right environment with the right people. So
Yeah.
I'm sat with property, I'm sat with HR, I'm sat with buying. It's a whole group, shop fittings. It's a whole group of people that make those decisions. I said last time, I'm not sitting in my office stroking a white cat. So let's assume I look at all of those things. Yeah, you think it's funny. I don't. I find it very frustrating. Again, what benefit have I got of closing stores? And let's get on to this. Why are so many stores empty on the high street? Why are they?
So the question is, do you worry about the impacts of store closures on the high street?
I'm a retailer. Of course I worry about the state of the high street.
That's all I want. I wanted an
by
answer to that
definition,
question.
I would worry about the state of the high street.
Finally, just allowing other colleagues to come in, do you see in terms of mitigating the harmful impacts of a store closure on the high street as part of your business's corporate social responsibility?
Of course not. Of course not. It's not my fault. The high street's dying, is it? It's not House of Fraser's fault. It's not Marks and Spencer's fault. It's not Debenham's fault the high street is dying. It's very, very simple why the high street is dying. And you all know the answer, but we have to say it. It's the internet. The internet is killing the high street. I know. We have a £400 million internet business. That's 400 million. Guess what that affects the most? The high street, by definition. The question is what to do about it. If you want to save the high street, you have to address that problem. Right. It's as simple as that.
Right. Okay. Mark.
Chairman, thank you. Well, let's do that. Let's look at the future.
Okay.
What's your vision for the high street in 2030?
No, I wouldn't even go to 2030. I've already thought about this.
Okay.
I would like to bring that here today now. I want to make it crystal clear. The mainstream high street, as we think about today, not the Oxford streets, not the Westfields, the mainstream high streets are already dead. Dead. They can't survive. Their patient has died. Now, mainstream, that we're talking about the majority. Now what we're going to talk about is, could we save the vast minority? What can we do for them? Because some of those other high streets, the decline has happened. It's not retailers' fault they have to come out of high streets. They have to come out of high streets not because they're making money, because they're losing money. And people then get very confused about losing money. You lose money even on a bit of paper if it says, oh, look, this store's profitable. Accountancy-wise, it might be, but it doesn't allow for central overheads. You must look at a store's profitability after central overheads. I promise you, somebody has to pay to get the goods to the store. Think about it. We'll say, oh, this store was profitable, yeah, but we didn't allow anything for central overheads. Well, how would it survive if it didn't have a warehouse supply and an HR role? Think about it, it's impossible. So you have to look at it after central overheads. The vast majority of the high street, therefore, has already died. Dead. In the bottom of the swimming pool, dead.
Okay. So how do you resuscitate it?
That person's died. Okay. Now I said the vast minority of the high street. This person, besides the top 20%, is flatlining. They're on the operating table. They're flatlining. You've got a problem. The only thing you can do is try and give them a massive electric shock.
And what is that?
It's very simple. By the way, the Sports Direct Group will not thank me for saying that. You have to immediately tax the internet. And I don't mean just the pure play internet. That's why I say the Sports Direct Group will not thank me for this. You have to tax the internet for the good of the high street, the good of the all. So, if you turn around and you said, okay, as a minimum, and I don't mind if it started in 6 months' time because that gives all retailers a time to adjust. So you've got to tax the web boys 20%. But that, by the way, that will affect me massively. I've just told you I've got a £400 million business, so that's going to be a big bill. Unless what? Well, think about what would be fair, and think about what you want to achieve. You want to save the high street. Okay, you accept that if the high street 20% was not savable, 60% is in a terrible, terrible mess as we speak, and 20%, like the sort of super elite in Oxford Streets and that, survive anyway. But in my opinion, that's not really the high street. Oxford Street isn't the high street, it's not really relevant. So what you're then trying to do is trying to save the majority of this 60%. And you've got to do some really, really simple stuff and say, right, okay, what happens if more than 20% of your turnover was on the web? You go, oh, you've got to pay the 20% then. Oh, that'll make it harsh. Okay, why would you put in a band of 20%? Plus, minus, people say currently the web is 20%. That's what they say. And they say it's going to go to 40%. That's what they say. So let's assume that the 40% is not the right figure. It's somewhere between 30 and 50%. It's what's going to go to. Very simple. If I'm a retailer and I'm the SDI group, I will make sure not to pay the 20% tax. I keep 80% of my revenues going through the high street, because I would. Because I'd stop closing 3 stores into one or 2 stores into one, because I would say, no, it now makes perfect business sense for me to cross-subsidise those stores and keep them open. And what's more, what I'd like is if we have click and collect through the high street stores, that acts as a credit. In other words, that helps against your 20%. It means SD Group would then look to keep as many stores open as possible, because it knows this internet business is coming, and what's more, would not only reinvest in old stores instead of closing them. Guess what? I bet it would go on an opening spree.
That's very helpful, and it's useful to understand the nature of that sales tax. But just looking at the other side of it, so those dead high streets that you've described, and, you know, we've seen it in evidence. Yeah. What do we do for them?
Okay, so let's assume you have to do the things. It's my answer is based on the fact that you've done the 20% web tax. That's basically done.
That's about competitiveness,
So that 20% is done. Now, a Sports Direct group is desperate to keep 80% of its sales on the high street, because it doesn't want to slip into the 81% band and pay the tax. It will then look to open stores in places just like you're talking about. And how would you get an SD to open stores? You would turn around to an SD and say, look, if the council, and by the way, the council have to agree to this, gave them free rates for 5 years, on the condition that SD matched every pound of free rates with a pound of investment that has to just go in that site. All of a sudden, you've got an empty store. The rates are going to be collapsing anyway, because by definition, all the empty stores are bringing all the rents down, which are bringing all the rates down, which bring back the income anyway. Now we've got to turn it and force it the other way. So you say, well, look, if we put in that 5 years there, and an SDI, by the way, could equally be Marks and Spencer's, it could be Debenhams, could be any retailer that you say the council tick that's worth them having, because they have to decide. The retailer has to agree to put pound for pound of rate savings, match them and invest them, so no free ride for the retailer. The landlord would have to agree to, say, a 25% reduction in rent. Why? Because why should the council not get anything and they get the full rental value? That's not fair. So you suddenly get the council agreeing, the retailer agreeing, the landlord agreeing, and then you get, well, if you're, for example, a public company, you can also say, but the public company has to agree to have a, say, 25% reduction in dividend. So the stakeholders or the shareholders of that company, everybody has to put in. And if you don't sort of help retailers like me, very simple, force me. Because you watch us reinvest. Because we have to. Because we need to keep 80% of our trade on the high street. And simultaneously, you've levelled the playing field with the internet, the web guys. Simultaneously, one big knockout punch. Will it be perfect? Absolutely not. Will every percentage be right? No. Will somebody cheat the system somewhere? You're not kidding. Because people cheat. That's what businesses do. Some accountant somewhere will find some way of fiddling the numbers, not actually spending the money on that store, because they gave it away as a design fee, because actually, in fact, that store, we put down 500 grand for a design fee, because it wasn't for that store, it was for 10 stores or 20 stores. So you have to put draconian measures in around like an incentive like this. You have to turn around to an SDI group, and I don't care, by the way, I'll sit next to Marks and Spencer's, I'm quite happy, saying, if you fiddle, for every pound you fiddle, you're going to get a £10 fine. Very simple, it's 10 to 1. It's 10 to 1. Don't fiddle the council, it's not fair. Yeah, their money's not free. 10 to 1 fine, love it. I would therefore make sure that I was only claiming £90 instead of £100 or 95, because I don't want to go near that edge. The accountants that audit those figures, because they've got to be submitted to the council, they've got to be fair. Well, they can have £1. So the retailer can have a £10 fine, and for every pound that's wrong, and the auditor can have £1 fine. Because, half the time the auditors do these things and come up with these methodologies and everything else, and they create this money and this thing and everything else, and nobody quite understands it. So you've got to be draconian. What else would I put in? Well, I'd put in, for any executives of the retailer, if it's perpetual abuse, you can give them a custodial sentence. And what's more, why don't you extend it to the non-execs? Because what I see in life is too many people on the merry-go-round, the problem's on somebody else's shift. And what people do is, because they move around, it's like you've been given this short time window to make a difference. So you really don't care about the next person coming in, because everybody says in business, rotation's great, this, that. People get old, they get stale, it needs freshening up. So you get this very much short-termism that makes it impossible for a group like this to actually make a difference on the high street. I'm telling you, plus minus impossible. I think you've got an impossible job. That's why I sort of came sort of some self sort of confession to say, I'll tell you how I would deal with an SDI, the same as an M&S. And that's how you will get us to invest. Force us, stroke, help us. The combination, the carrot and the stick. And people like SDI will step up to the plate. And you will then become... We would never, never, never want to become 21% online. Why? Because we'll be subject to the tax. So we're going to make sure we keep it 80% in the high street. And by the way, click and collect, we're going to make sure people go to the high street to pick up those parcels. They don't deliver them at home because it pays us to. And if we have to give them gift vouchers to come in the store that they get to spend, guess what? They're then going to come in the store, they're then going to visit the high street. But you guys, you have to do more. You have to do free parking. I'm not talking about Oxford Street. I don't care about Oxford Street. We all pay millions and millions in rent there. I'm talking about high streets as your evidence, that are barren, that are deserted, that are closing. And you still get some towns that charge for parking. Therefore, you've negated the whole free click and collect, get a voucher, because they've got to pay it all away in parking fees. Everybody, which is impossible, has to come together and look at it on this kind of scale. I know it sounds very socialist. I did say earlier, I'm not this crazy capitalist that everybody thinks I am. I'm genuinely not. And I think something like that, if you really delivered it, and you really, not being I'm the perfect character to talk about this, shone the light on the bad boys, but also why can't you shine the light on when somebody does something right and something well, and hold them up, and hold some of the councils up? Because some of these local government authorities, with Hoff, just so we're clear, have really, really worked hard to help us. They've been on the phones, they've been saying, we want to meet you, how can we help, let's have a conversation, and you're thinking, okay, there'll be a time for this, let's get the waters calmed down, let's get the warehouse up and running, let's get the internet going, let's get the short-term leases solved, now let's sit down with the landlord and say, do you want us to co-invest with you? How do you want to do it? How can we make things better? And the councils, people don't get enough credit. I mean, everybody think I'll be against Kate's councils. I don't know why. But the councillors I've met know their numbers inside out and they genuinely care. That's their city. That's their town.
Thank you for that. I mean, just briefly, from a business point of view, I mean, a lot of people say that the department store is dead.
Yeah.
You clearly don't agree because you've just bought into one.
Yeah.
How do you buck the trend?
I haven't just bought into one. I bought into Hoff like 6-7 years ago. And I also did Debenhams about 5 years ago, started buying estate. What I believe in, that the concept of the department store is actually correct. If you think about it, you get everything in one building. What happens with department stores, in my opinion, is they actually have a bad offering, plus minus, in nearly everything. So if you can get retailers to take the right amount of space in a department store, like a Sports Direct in a House of Fraser, but elevated because it's House of Fraser, Harrods of the High Street, all of a sudden everybody wants to go to get their Nike, Adidas, whatever brands they want to go there. So I don't believe that department stores are dead. I think they have to evolve. They have to be different. It's not about just a sea of clothing anymore. It's about, why wouldn't you put on the top floors of department stores free gaming, and I mean computer games, just so we're totally clear, do you know what I mean, that drags that generation through the store. What does it cost to set up? The top floor of that department store was losing money and not taking anything anyway. You see it in Curry's PC World, I don't know if you know, but you go in and they've got this free gaming going on. I think it's a brilliant idea. Now that affects the young people into the store, and by the way, gaming, the average gamer is like 31, so they're not like 12 as people imagine, they're actually adults. So all of a sudden, you're creating a place where somebody goes because they need to go and they interact and there's something there. All they don't want to do, not being rude, is ripped off the park to go there. And you suddenly get the people coming. And guess what? For example, let's assume, I'm going to say it the other way around, let's assume that my wife is an avid gamer and I'm not. Yeah. Therefore, we ended up going to the department store. She goes and does the gaming, and I wander off around the department store, have a cup of tea, buy something. like that. That is the sort of thing that can change department stores. What they are stuck with is prehistoric rents that are no longer correct, and they aren't, and that's why landlords have to take their share of the pain, because it was from, the rents were set pre the internet, pre the web. They're no longer relevant, and not being rude, but the business rates are based on those, and it's madness. So that's what killing department stores. The guys at Debenhams suddenly didn't become bad retailers overnight. Debenhams is a good business. It just can't survive on the rent and the business rates it's paying, and it probably can't survive on the amount of people it has in the store. Probably can't. Probably has to be more self-service tills, more this, more that. House of Fraser, it will elevate itself to a more luxury offer. So it has a different role to play in the high street. They all have a different role. House of Fraser's role is to bring luxury to the high street. That's what its role is.
Thank you.
Okay. How do you get a quick follow-up?
Yeah, just very quick.
Very quick.
Thank you for coming in. Actually, I've been trying to meet with you since the 22nd of August, as it happens.
Okay.
Just interested, Sports Direct International, do you have premises, businesses in other countries, and other countries doing this better in terms of adapting to the internet challenge in policy?
I have to be honest, not particularly. The UK is quite, and is a quite known fact, it's quite ahead on the web. We adopted the web very early in the UK, okay. So we actually got ahead of a lot of our European, if you like, stores and that sort of thing. So okay. We're a little bit further down the chain. So I think the decline in European high streets and stores and everything else will just be the same, but just a few years later.
Okay, thank you.
Teresa.
Thank you, Mr. Ashley. You've mentioned business rates. What proportion of your turnover do business rates amount to?
Of our turnover, I'm going to say something like 3%, something like that, 2.5%.
3%. And you mentioned one of your ideas is to have a sort of holiday from business rates for about 5 years.
Yeah.
How do you think councils will manage to provide the services they need without those business rates? What do you think they do with that money now?
No. So let's be crystal clear, and I totally agree with you. So we're on totally the same page. That is because you tax, or whatever you would like to call it, 20% the web. You have to get that money in first before you can give any back. Yeah? Okay. This isn't a case of, oh, I understand the councils don't have the money. I'm not under any illusion. I have met a few of them, and that they are very, they do a very good job of managing their budgets. Can I put it like that?
Okay, so, but when you talked about this tax on internet sales, you're talking about, let me make sure I understand you. So you've got a business where some of it's on the internet, some of it people come into stores and buy.
Yeah.
So you're saying where things were bought through the internet, you would pay an extra layer of, like corporation tax, but it would be like a sales tax, like a VAT.
Correct.
Right? But how will that compete with companies that sell from abroad and offshore? You wouldn't, and there's a massive number of those that don't pay the level tax that you're talking about. So how would that help?
So it's very simple. In theory, you can tax them from abroad. You say if you make the sale in the UK. Yeah, in theory, yes.
But it doesn't happen at the moment, does it?
Yeah. Well, it does, because if you're of a certain size, you have to elect where to pay the VAT or the tax. So all you simply say, it's an additional one to the VAT, and they have to elect to pay it in the UK on goods that are sold in the UK.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay, so that would need to change in quite a lot of tax law to do that
Correct.
at the moment, because at the moment you've almost got like a transfer pricing thing where...
Correct.
Okay. So So you think a sales tax rather than maybe a purchase tax, an internet... So someone who buys something from your store on the internet, would it not be easier for them to pay like a penny tax themselves and it be collected in the way VAT is? Do you not think that would be better?
No, because I think what you want to do is you want to get retailers saving the high street. So what I said was...
Not done a very good job so far, have they?
No. But is it really the retailer's fault? I mean, I'm a retailer, and we would have probably said at one time, and this is a real live example, maybe we'd have said, I don't know, we could have had in the UK 800 stores. We've probably got to 500 or 600 stores, and it would have been at that time when we floated, because it was really before the web was really conceived as a threat, to look to get up to that kind of number. Now you look and you say, maybe half that number, maybe 250, 300. The 500-600 is actually halved. It's not gone up, it's swung the other way. That is not a retailer's fault that mobile phones came in. That's not a retailer's fault that the web came in.
But the point of retail, people are in business.
Yeah.
They take the risk, they take the profit, sometimes they take the loss.
Yeah.
So being in business means you've got to be adaptable.
Yeah.
So it may not be the retailer's fault, but what you're saying, it's the fixed costs of rent and business rates that holds back the ability for retail to adapt. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, correct. Because it was set at a different time. But what I'm saying is, so it's crystal clear, is that if a retailer keeps its internet under 20%, it doesn't pay the tax.
But then you've got companies that are completely internet based.
Yeah, well, they have to pay the tax then. That's very fair. They have to pay the tax, yeah? Because otherwise, the high street couldn't possibly compete with the internet. It'd be impossible.
So, okay, so just to clarify, what you're saying is this idea of having an internet sales tax for businesses that are part internet, part store, or whatever, that can only actually work if we actually look at the Googles of this world and the Amazons and the people who are, okay. So as the way the tax law is at the moment, it's not, because earlier you said it's very simple, but it's actually not that simple, is it? It's quite...
The concept is very simple. The concept of it is very simple. You've got to drive the people back into the high street, and they should benefit from going into the high street. So they don't have to pay the tax, because that retailer is providing a service for that high street, that town, that city. Yeah, and that's where your money comes from. I totally accept councils can't afford to just be writing cheques to help with shop fits in town centres. I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm agreeing with you.
But every big retailer says the way to fix this is business rates and free parking.
And where's that money going to come from?
But it's not as simple as that, though, is it?
No.
It's actually, if you provide what people want, they'll come and buy it, whether it's on the internet or in your store. If you provide an experience, like you're saying.
Correct. But there's not enough experiences, if you like, for the big retailers to suddenly offer overnight. What you've got to do is you've got to help them by helping them help themselves. So if you think about it, if what I'm saying, and I said it earlier, Sports Direct won't be very pleased with me for my suggestion. It's not a necessarily a good fix for Sports Direct as a group. What it is a fantastic fix for the high street. And we have to realise the high street won't make 2030. It's not going to be there. Unless you do something really radical and grab the bulls by the horns, it won't be there. I'm sitting here voting to punish SDI Group. That is not very normal. Why would I do it? Because if the high street miraculously, the minority now can be saved, in 2030, guess what? I might have a fabulous business still. Otherwise, I'm just going to end up being a web player. Like the vast majority of the high street. You really have to grab the bull by the horns. But now, and you can't put in a watered-down version, because a watered-down version won't work. You watch Amazon open up on the high street. You watch these pure play boys open up on the high street then, because then they're going to think, God, we're going to have to pay this 20% tax. We then have to play on a level playing field with the high street. You watch the Sports Direct open up stores. I'm telling you, because it has to. You have to help me or make me. One or the other.
Liz.
Okay, so we just talked about business rates. So I'd like to turn to the other element, which is rent. So is rent actually the greater pressure facing retailers? And is it increasing? And what kind of proportion of turnover does rent represent?
Okay, so if business rates by definition is 3%, plus minus, rent is 6%. It's very simple because your business rates are basically half what your rent is. I have those numbers are very approx for me. By the way, can we please confirm that I'm not giving out any inside information or anything else, and won't get in trouble for just being open and honest and everything else. And I am in a closed period. So when I'm talking about the high street, I'm not talking about Sports Direct's trading. Yeah? Okay, sorry.
We understand that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So it's about 6%. Is that the greater cost pressure than business rates?
Yeah, because one's 3 and one's 6. Yeah. It's as simple as that. If our rent's halved to 3%, all of a sudden that would mean you'd pay no business rates at all. It's very simple. Roughly speaking, one's 3, one's 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, thinking about the terms of the lease and the level of rent, where does the bargaining power lie? We've had lots of evidence about, whether it's greedy leaseholders or landowners, or whether it's people pushing too hard, retailers pushing too hard on them. What's your view of that?
Landlords and retailers, by definition, have always been uneasy bedfellows. Yeah? The landlord's job is to get the maximum amount of rent. The retailer normally wants to pay the minimum amount of rent. They will both sit in a room and promise each other everything, but in reality, when one has the upper hand, he gets his big hammer and he bashes the other one, and if the other one gets the upper hand, he pings out his hammer and he bashes the other one. So how would you regulate that? You can't really regulate what a landlord is able to charge you in rent. If you are, and I just say it again in Oxford, Bond Street, let's think of a different street, Bond Street. Who feels sorry for any retailer on Bond Street? Well, I don't, yeah? I certainly don't feel sorry for any retailer on Bond Street. And if those landlords are able to charge them tens of millions of pounds a year in rent, good luck to them, because they're able to pay it. But that's not the case when you've got somebody who has signed leases with only upward rent reviews in many, many years ago, and those rents have collapsed. It's how do you help those people? When in 2006 you would make sign for a store that was worth 50,000 rent, and by the way, that was probably a good deal, and now it's only worth 10. What happens? The retailer goes bust, the store's closed, and it causes it implodes on itself. It's a downward death spiral. It's unbelievable once it gets out of kilter. If it's always going up, even gradually, the system works. The rent review process. All you have to do is get a couple of potty retailers, for whatever reason their business is on fire. McDonald's years ago. McDonald's wants to rent a site. Well, they're going to make a fortune. They can afford to pay anything. Another retailer comes along, an SD. I'm not being funny. SD, 15 years ago, often used to set the record rents. Often. Why? Because plus minus, it used to make the most per square foot, because it plus minus sold the most per square foot. People like M&S and all the big boys were considered in a league of their own. So then what happens, at all the rent reviews, they use these huge record rents McDonald's and SD set to set everybody else's rents. For those small retailers, medium-sized retailers, they were forced to sign 15, 20, 25-year leases. And those rents are upward-only rent reviews, and they're stuck with them, and therefore they're plus-minus stuck with the business rates off them. So it's a very draconian system, but nobody ever envisaged the web. I mean, even the famous select committees can't be blamed for the web. It's not your fault, you didn't do it. But it is a fact of life. Yeah? I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I make sense to myself, and I make sense as a retailer.
In the situation that we're now in, what do we do to make sure there's that fair balance between landlord and retailer to make sure the high street survives? But
what I genuinely suggest is you empower the councils to turn around to the landlords, and don't forget there was really four, if you like, stakeholders in this. There was the local council, there was the retailer, there was the landlord, and there is the, if you like, shareholders in the public company stroke retailers. So everybody has to put it in. So if you signed up voluntary, and I could come to some of the places in the UK that I've come out of, because I've been doing consolidation and making it all more profitable and less is more, and you turn around and you say to me, Mike, you've got to get some, you've got to work with the council, you absolutely got to work with the landlord, and all of a sudden the landlord goes, well, I'll give you 25% off, and you can then, if you use me, which you won't want to do, as a role model, because that sounds as a contradiction in terms, to turn around and say to this committee, okay, How quickly could we see you open up 50 stores? You're closing stores. You're closing them, Mike. You're not opening stores. Let's not mess about. Every year you're chunking down the stores and you're shutting these stores that damage those small high streets the most. Because you're not shutting your Oxford streets and your wherever, your Bond streets. No. So I want you to see you reinvest. But then I'll turn around and I say, well, I want you to commit to doing the web tax so it balances the playing field. Because then I've got a future. I know those web retailers have got to invest with me. They've got to make the high street work with physical. Simple as that. So you've now got a combination.
Okay. So looking at House of Fraser, how have you worked with landlords to renegotiate rent on the House of Fraser stores that you're keeping open? Okay,
so besides Glasgow that we bought, that we can invest in, we literally take them the numbers and we say to them, you do realise that these stores lose money? And we have information from the CVA and we know it's profitable. And you go, but they haven't put any central overheads in. So if you've got a House of Fraser store taking hypothetically 40 million and making 2 million, they go, oh look, the store makes 2 million. The landlord's going, well, you can pay the rent, you make 2 million a year. My rent's only, in their case, would be about 4 million a year. So, but you make 2 million a year, I don't need to take my rent down. You say, what about central overheads? What about the trucks that get it there? What about all the costs that are central overheads? All the central marketing, everything? Let's just say that's 10% of turnover. 40 million makes 2 million, add on the central overheads. Oh, it now loses 2 million. 4 million, 2 million, loses 2 million. The landlords are, we don't believe you. So I don't believe it either. There's nothing I can do about it. The accountants, and why I said earlier about accountants, the accountants are nearly able to make any answer numerically up you want them to make. I mean, they just are. You go there and, well, if you applied this, you did this, and I did this, and this. You don't even understand what they're talking about. And they'll go, I can make that store loss-making, or I can make it profitable. I'll put exceptions in. What are they when they're at home? It's okay. We can put an exception in because we're going to accelerate the shop fit because we've decided it needs a shop fit. So all of a sudden that year you can make that store make a loss. You can also go, no, these shop fits are quite wonderful. They're actually going to last another 50 years and we're going to slow down the depreciation. The accountants are able, this is their job by the way, to move the numbers about pretty much at will.
So the question was how you've worked with landlords to renegotiate.
Yeah, but I tell them the truth.
Fraser stores. So what you're saying is you can make the figures accountants.
Correct. And I say to them, I promise you those are wrong. And if I produce you're going to ask me a prediction of what I think we're going to take. Why don't we work on a percentage of turnover with a base rent? Why don't I pay you a percentage of turnover? So if I win, you win. It's quite unique. It's not something that most landlords like because they prefer to have a guaranteed income. But if the alternative is nothing, then they probably say we'll have a base rent, and it's quite simple. If you agree, for example, a 6% turnover rent, and you say that the base rent is 80% of the following year's turnover, yeah, you roll it every couple of years, they're getting their base, you're getting your 6%. And it's quite a fair mechanism to put in. And when landlords begin to realise what a terrible state Hoff is actually in, not was in, is in, it begins to dawn on them, and the investment needed to make that store the Harrods of the High Street, you turn around to them and say, okay, you got that store now, make turnover 40 million. Don't forget, after central overheads, it now loses 2 million. It's 100,000 square feet. To refit that store, because it hasn't been fitted for 15, 20 years, it's all out of date, it's not what the consumers want. How much does that cost? 15 million, 150 quid a square foot. By the way, if it was Harrods, it would cost an awful lot more per square foot. So I said Harrods of the High Street, not Harrods, because Harrods will spend at least double that, and some per square foot to totally refit the Harrods store. Now somebody has to find the 15 million. That's a lot of money for a store that's currently losing 2 million. Now you see the problem, and then you say to them, "I tell you what, we'll guarantee to we'll put our money in, we'll fit the store. We'll give you the most amazing store, but you've got to give us the percentage, and you've got to give us some rent free and help us pay for it." Okay. And then everybody wins. And by the way, I might have to sign a longer lease.
Right. We are getting to the point where we're virtually at the end of the session. Yeah,
okay.
So, okay.
Well, can I say as well, Mr Ashley, that I've written to you as well, asking to meet with you about House of Fraser Metro Store. Will you agree to meet with me today to discuss House of Fraser Metro Store?
Absolutely not.
Why is that?
Because if I do it for one person, think of all the other people that I've let down. Yeah, people keep thinking I can just do these one-off things. They're not easy to do. It's not because I'm avoiding the debate with you. What I would say is, right, why don't we get all the people from House of Fraser together? Because not being rude, there is 40 of you, yeah, and so I will meet the group of 40. But do you want to sit in the same room with the landlords?
Okay.
But I'm happy to turn up. I bet the landlords won't be very happy to turn up.
Right. Okay.
Yeah?
Okay, that's something I'd like to explore with you later.
Okay, as long as it's as a group.
That's enough, Mr. Ashley. That's helpful. It seems the landlords don't turn up, you will.
As long as it's a group. I don't want a one-on-one or special.
We'll pass that on to colleagues, Mr. Ashley.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. We've got a brief supplementary from that. Very brief.
Just on that. There was news over the weekend that there's widespread expectation that rents are going to crash in 2019. We'll see a reduction of maybe 20%, as reported in the Financial Times.
Yeah.
M&G and LNG are going to be hit quite hard. That would be hopefully good news for the high street, wouldn't it? And do you think that if that is what is trending, what is going to happen, that if councils, and I have a particular issue here, if councils actually allow the landlords to change the purpose, the approval on that site to become residential or whatever, then of course that will keep the rents up. And that will act against keeping retail on our high streets.
Right, now you're going to make me hated by every landlord in the country, but you're absolutely correct.
Okay.
You're absolutely 100% correct.
We can move on to council role now, finally, Mary.
Thank you, and thank you very much, Mr Ashley. Earlier on you mentioned, and you talked about local councils have really tried to help you. So it does suggest that there's been quite a big role for councils there. Yeah. Just how important to you is having that relationship with councils and working with councils, and what have you been doing to try to work more closely with them?
So look, it's very difficult for me to say it without naming people, and it's not good to name people because it's always the people you leave out. But exactly what Matt just said there is exactly what has happened. A huge House of Fraser store, a real key store, and basically the landlord is, well, we'll pay a bit of empty rates, we'll keep it empty, and we'll force the council to give us planning. That council turned around and said, I am telling you, you must keep House of Fraser open. You must make an effort to keep House of Fraser open. These guys will help to keep House of Fraser open. You must get together and you must bang your heads together and do something. And what the council's input made it happen. Otherwise, that was a closure. And sometimes these closures then actually don't become closures because of the councils saying, no, we should strongly suggest you do everything to keep that store. There may be, and let's be realistic, the upper parts of the building could be residential or something like that. You know, you can do more with the buildings than they are currently. I accept House of Fraser cannot have 500,000 square feet in Birmingham. I mean, 500,000 square feet. I mean, honestly, you would need an Uber to take you round it. It's ridiculous. It's so too much, too big. But what you don't want to lose is the House of Fraser. Sometimes if you can convert the top 2, 3, 4 floors, and everybody works together, and the council are like, okay, as long as you keep this much retail, and we mean retail, no cheating, no cheating, okay, fair enough. I'm telling you, councils are good. I've got to say one, because I can't help myself. The guys in Bath, for some reason I ended up going to see Bath. That's what happens when I go and see somebody I shouldn't. They had done exactly that, and they'd worked with the previous House of Fraser management, and they'd actually put the upper parts of the building to residential, which meant the retail was viable underneath. I went to meet them. They were absolutely, Mike, I'm telling you, we can't give you any kind of subsidy that we can't realistically see getting it back, because that's £1 we haven't got. And I ended up sitting with them, going through their numbers, and I could see their problem. And plus minus, somehow we're going to come to some sort of deal that hopefully House of Fraser can survive, and the council can carry on collecting a fair amount of rent and business rates. So councils, I know I shouldn't be sitting here, I'm not the people people would think I'd sit and argue for councils, but I think they could be empowered, and my dealings with them so far, they've been pretty amazing, got to say.
So it's huge, obviously hugely important. It's not just financial then, it's the way that you're able to work with councils. What other things would they do that you would want to be involved with that would be helpful? Public realm, or you've mentioned planning, being able to be...
I'd love to see more park and ride. Yeah, I'd love to see more free car parks. I personally would do the system that, and I know the council have to buy in some private car parks and they don't have the money, but let's imagine this 20% off the web. That would give them some firepower. Yeah, say, well, with that 20% off the web, why don't you go and buy all those town centre car parks? And by the way, if you go in a store and you spend over £10, say, you get a free 2-hour stamp. You're allowed a maximum of 3. You can have free parking for 6 hours. The council own the car park because they've got it from the web money. They can then subsidise the car park because it is for the high street. It's not for people to come and go to work on a train and all that fiddling and messing about and all that nonsense. Yeah, and anybody who does get fiddled, I'll just make the penalties 10 times, because that stops me fiddling anything. That's all I can say. So if you make the penalties big, you tend to behave better, and you could then re-energise the high streets from that. Better park and ride, free parking, but only if you've got the stamps from the stores. Simple little stuff. I am no different to anybody else. When there's free glasses at the petrol station, I want them. I want them because they're free. I can't help it. I want them. And I definitely don't need free petrol station glasses. But I do still want them. I don't care. Yeah?
Human nature is what it is. But you've obviously you've come forward with a lot of different ideas today, and been engaging in terms of how you would like to interact with councils. Just how supportive would you be of business improvement districts, or any sort of business conglomeration that got put forward in order to improve the local area and to get people onto high streets?
I'm not such a fan of that, because I think it's too little and it gets very diluted. I literally think you guys have got to grab the ball by the horns. You've got to literally, how can I say it? It's like, what's the thing in some sort of cataclysmic event? Because you're so far behind. If you just imagine 5 years ago, a retailer was down 1%, like for like. The web started to get hold. 4 years ago, and don't forget it's compounding, he was 2% down, or she. 3 years ago, 3%. Last year, 4%. This year, 5%. I'll give you a clue. What do you think is going to happen next year? And plus minus, that's exactly what's happening. It is. It's not. I'm not crying for retailers that are my size and that make the money I make, because nobody in their right mind would. But what you're trying to do is making sure that these, if you like, are currently more successful retailers don't up stumps and leave the high streets. I understand what you're trying to do. I've just got what I think is a practical way of doing it. Help me or make me. Very simple. Right. Maybe a combination of both.
Just finally,
sorry.
Earlier on you said the high street was dead.
Yes.
It sounds like you've got a lot of faith in its revival.
Yeah, but I by definition, I've got no education. I can't do anything other than retail. But I can see in our business we would, as I say, have to be made to do something, or the high street will die. I can't do anything else. I am wed to retail. I can't suddenly become an investment banker. I haven't got any qualifications. Retailing is in my blood. So to me, I can always see that there could be some light at the end of the tunnel. And remember, the biggest thing that's killed the high streets is not the high streets themselves. it's the web. Be absolutely crystal clear. The web has killed the high street, not the local councils, not this, not that. Maybe everybody's acted far too slowly. Maybe 5 years ago I should have been sat here because I'd have told you exactly what was going to happen, because there is no alternative unless you do something, some huge cataclysmic change that is what's going to happen. It is just going to die and you're going to be left with Oxford Street and Bond Street. And by the way, outside of London, it's going to be like a ghost town. Sorry, that's what it's going to be.
Just very, very briefly, just to give some scale of the issue, in terms of rents, which clearly are a major issue that you're trying to grapple with, could you just give us some idea what sort of rent reduction you expect to see over the stores that stay open? What sort of percentage drop would you expect to see?
House of Fraser?
Yeah.
In the base rents, it's probably going to be around 50% in the base rents, yeah? But you're talking now on average, so some landlords are going to get nothing. So other landlords are still going to keep 100%.
So you'll basically keep the business open as long as you just pay the business rates and they get nothing. That's
but you've got the scale. You've got some people are going to get nothing,
right,
naught, and other people are actually going to be able to put their rent up.
The scale's about 50%.
Because I'm not being funny. If you've got a House of Fraser, let's talk about it I must name the place. I'll get told off. But House of Fraser, let's talk about if I had one in Bond Street. Because I'll talk about hypothetical one I'll get told off. Rents in Bond Street are still going up.
Right.
So you've got to be very careful where you target this money. If you sat here and said to me, oh, that's very good, Knightsbridge needs to give people free money for shop fits, I'd take you outside and think you're a lunatic. It's got to be where the high street is failing. Okay. It's got to be where the high street needs help. So the rent reductions
will be variable according to the...
Correct, it's totally variable. But our rent's going to half a House of Fraser, and the only reason they are is who else is going to take the stores. Yeah.
Okay, just briefly as well. You've got, you've obviously got a big interest in Debenhams as well.
Yeah.
Is there any indication that Debenhams and House of Fraser might come to some arrangements in the future?
What in what?
Well, in terms of stores, joint use of stores.
Working together? You mean? Yeah. But they should have done years ago. I told them to work together. They should work together. You know why? Because they've got separate managements and separate egos, and it's not their equity. Right. So, in actual fact, they will wander off and get another job somewhere else. Why on earth House and Fraser and Debenhams don't do more together now? Say it was buying together. Very simple. Save on logistics. Instead of having
Would it save on the number of stores that if you've got a Debenhams and House of Fraser next to each other, you might end up with one store in the future?
But you will end up with one anyway if the market isn't right. If you've got to think about it. One of the reasons that I think House of Fraser failed is it didn't elevate itself. It didn't change its proposition. Consumers today are more into luxury brands. I'm telling you, Harrods and Selfridges will have a good year. I'm telling you, luxury brands are on the up. Teenagers, people today wear their wealth. We have a chain, it's called Flannels. It's not down. Why? Because it happens to be in the right place at the right time, because luxury is coming in. I openly tell people, I am not crying. Don't feel sorry for me. But what you're not here to feel sorry for me, you're here to make me make a difference or help me make a difference. That's the answer.
Thank you very much. I say to my colleagues when you were talking about free glasses, I said, well, I won't mention free transfers. I won't go into that territory today. I think we've avoided that one. Anyway, Ms. Ashley, you told us that you're not a pantomime villain, you're not Father Christmas. I think you've still left us to decide whether you're the wicked uncle or the fairy godmother, and time will no doubt tell. But thank you very much indeed for coming to answer our questions today and going through quite a lot of issues about how you see the House Street developing, hopefully being successful in the future. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Thank you.